Well, let's go on to our top 5 list for this week. This week we are doing our top 5 commentators of all time. And did you have any honorable mentions?
I'm going to give one honorable mention to a person that gets hated on quite a bit, but as far as WCW and the early 90s, he was the voice of it, and I loved it. It was Tony Schiavone.
Ah, yes, Tony. Tony's on my list, but we will get to him later. So I have 3 honorable mentions,
Okay.
they're all current people. One is Corey Graves.
Okay.
I love his work on NXT. I love him on Raw. He's the best thing on Raw announcing by far. Then Steve Corino. He is so entertaining, and his partner Kevin Kelly. Corino and Kelly together doing commentary on Ring of Honor is just outstanding, and they play off each other so well. So yeah, they are my honorable mentions.
Well, I did not know. Let me just say this. I didn't know we were doing color guys in it. I just went commentator versus color guys are 2 different things. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So
do you want to rework your list real quick?
I want to just add an honorable mention.
Okay.
He's also on our greatest manager list of all time, Bobby the Brain Heenan.
Oh, damn.
Just in his humanoids, and he was whoever was the commentator or the actual announcer, he was always the perfect foil for, because, you know, he was the side of the heel. And honestly, I can say a lot of his commentating is kind of made me see the world different, as far as when he would explain why a heel did things, it would, even though you might not necessarily agree, it actually made you understand.
Yeah, man, I completely forgot about Bobby Heenan. Damn, he's on my honorable mentions. Yeah, and to be fair, I should have clarified, when I say commentators, I'm just thinking of anyone sitting at the booth.
Okay.
Calling a match. So that will. If you want to rework your list, feel free.
I'm okay with my list still,
okay,
but
okay.
I did want to add him as an honorable mention.
Okay, good deal. All right, so who is your number 5?
My number 5 was the voice of the WWE growing up. He played the announcer and he played the color guy at one point in time, which showed his range. And you gotta go with Gorilla Monsoon.
Ah, yes, very good.
Yeah, he was very much the voice of a young age, and he treated the position with professionalism. And he, of course, you had Bobby the Brain and Jesse the Body Ventura, and you know those different teams. And he wasn't a particularly quick person, but he always had his signature comeback line, and that brought the show back to where it was supposed to be.
So we will see Gorilla on my list later on. My number 5 is Mauro Ranallo.
Okay.
I just think he has brought a breath of fresh air to the main roster commentary, and it's him on the Cruiserweight Classic with Daniel Bryan was just fantastic. All right, who's your number 4?
Mauro Ranallo. It was kind of funny that you said it then. Mauro Ranallo is so much better than anything anyone is doing right now. He had to be on my list. And I know this is an all-time list, and my time with him is very short, but I feel he is JR. He is a mixture of the next 3 people on my list. So much to the point where I feel energized, and he makes me care about matches I don't normally care about. And he does it, and I know he still does the whole Doritos and all those type of things, but the way he does it, you don't really notice it. He really does bring it back to wrestling.
Yeah, he is fantastic. He is great. So my number 4, we're going old school, Gordon Solie.
Gordon Solie. I don't. People will never. He's on my list, so you will never understand the reverence I have for that person. That he is the Walter Cronkite. He is the name of wrestling announcers. He is the all-time great. So,
all right, who is your number 3?
Number 3, the only man to do pay-per-view by himself. He was the announcer, he was the color guy, and in 3 words, oh my God, his name is Joey Styles.
God. And admittedly, Joey is not on my list. I'm not well versed in his stuff. I watched when ECW had their show on TNT for a while there. I watched that, which eventually became Spike. Or no, wait, was that? Yeah, it was TNT. TNN. Thank you. It was on TNN. I knew it was TN something. So I remember, in fact, the first show of ECW that I ever saw was the Dudley Boys Last Night, where they dropped the belts to Tommy Dreamer and the returning Raven. So yeah, my ECW experience is relatively limited, but everything I've heard from him I've really liked. I am not familiar with his work.
Well, you use your network, because ECW put on some great shows, and like they brought in Joel Gertner sometimes as his color guy, but most pay-per-views he called by himself because Paul Heyman couldn't afford to pay a color guy.
So if you were, on a real quick side note, if you were going to suggest someone who's interested in learning about ECW and watching ECW, where should they start?
Oh, man. I feel like if you're going on the network, I feel like you got to start with the speech. I feel like it was one of the better promos in wrestling history, and the one that changed. You have to start with the Shane Douglas. Shane Douglas, Eastern Conference title, Eastern Championship. When he says it's not that, it's Extreme. It is the beginning of ECW. So I'm saying start at the beginning. But that speech was such a powerful moment, as in it set the tone for what ECW was going to be. If you watch the first match and if you watch the last match of the original ECW, that speech set the tone for what ECW is.
Okay, I will have to look, and that is on the network, right?
That is on the network.
Okay, I'll have to go back and find that. I guess I suspect if I just search Shane Douglas on the network, I'll probably find it.
You'd be like, son of a bitch, if you're talking to Vince McMahon.
All right, so let's see. That was your number 3. My number 3 is Gorilla Monsoon. Yeah, he's just amazing.
Yeah, he called the first, I think, 7 WrestleManias, maybe 8. I was gonna say, he was very much to respect the name behind the gorilla position. Former WWF World Champion. I mean, you couldn't bring more legitimacy to a character than to our position than Gorilla Monsoon.
Yeah, he was awesome. Now, I remember WrestleMania 2 had those 3, since they were in 3 different buildings, had 3 different sets of announced teams. Was he on the one was he in the final building with the Hogan match?
Yes, he definitely. I think, he called that match.
Because that was also was that the one that had the Ricky Steamboat Hercules Hernandez match? I think so. I love that match. I don't know why. I think it's a kid thing. I might watch it now and go, gross. But I loved it at the time. So let's move on. Who is your number 2?
My number 2 is, again, as I stated, the Walter Cronkite of this professional wrestling business, and really the beginning voice of my childhood, Gordon Solie.
Very good.
Gordon Solie, he shaped how JR called matches. So in essence, he shaped how Joey Styles called matches. Then he shaped how Mauro Ranallo called matches. So anytime you hear Mauro Ranallo and you hear him getting excited and he's saying the right move names and everything like that, because Gordon Solie did it without ever raising his voice. So, but you can see the seeds that were planted by Gordon Solie.
And Gordon, so let's talk about Gordon Solie for a moment. He announced I know he did for the NWA.
Uh-huh.
Who else did he work with?
Georgia Championship Wrestling. I think he was mostly the voice for them. Like the Atlantic, the Atlantic Wrestling, Mid-Atlantic Wrestling, that type of thing. Mid-Atlantic, where I think that's where that was Ric's home base, is where he mainly called matches. And I remember him more than I've watched videos. I do go back and watch certain matches that I can, and he called it was just so professional, and to a point he was monotone, but he was such a face type of announcer, but he did try. You could see he was trying to report it as a legitimate sport, and since back then it was considered a legitimate sport, he was the most legitimate of them.
Yeah. So I'm looking it up now. He did play-by-play. He worked for Georgia Championship Wrestling from Florida, U.S. Championship Wrestling, Continental Championship Wrestling, and World Championship Wrestling. So essentially, he worked for Crockett.
Yeah.
and then Turner before retiring. So yeah, he was you're right. He called it like it was a real sport. He was just so good. And that was your number 2. So my number 2 is Jim Ross. And I suspect I know where he lands on your list.
Yeah.
You sound angry.
I assumed he was going to be one on your list.
Well, I love Jim Ross, but the number 1 on my list is, it's people will give me shit for it, I'm sure. But Jim Ross was just Jim Ross. I mean, he was, even after he had Parkinson's, right? Or,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, even after he had that attack and it affected the way he spoke, he was still fantastic, and we got so many good years out of him. So yeah, Jim Ross. Who's your number 1? Let me guess.
Jim Ross. No, Mid-South Wrestling, UWF Wrestling, WCW, WWF. He got fired, went back to WCW, and then became the voice of a new generation. Understand his story is what he has meant to wrestling. I don't think most people will ever understand. But the Stone Cold call, he called wrestling like it was legitimate because he has made it. He learned from Gordon Soley, so he called wrestling like it was legitimate. When the Mick Foley, I think he's dead, was like shaking, in me. That call was so perfect for that moment. When Dr. Death Steve Williams became the first UWF champion, the excitement in his voice because his true friend became world champion. I can keep going through moments because he is through my whole life as a wrestling fan. And the fact that he is a boy from Oklahoma, that just a small town in Oklahoma, that all he wanted to do was call OU games. Everything adds to him and what he means as an announcer. He is the voice of WWE. You can call Michael Cole whatever you want to. You can call that. But when the first Stone Cold call to, Mrs. Foley's baby boy, the Mick Foley interview, it's Jim Ross.
Yep. Yeah, Jim Ross was just phenomenal. So I pulled up his Wikipedia page. So Mid-South Wrestling, 1974 to 1982. Jim Crockett Promotions / WCW, 1982 to 1993. He was in the WWE from 1993 until 2013. He worked on Raw from 2002 to 2008, SmackDown from 2008 to 2009. He was doing sporadic things from between 2010 and 2013 before he got the boot for dumbass reasons. He's done shows for New Japan Pro Wrestling, and he does the Access show for New Japan Pro Wrestling right now, and he does some random things on the indies. So yeah, he is. When I put this list together, I'm thinking my personal favorites. If I'm going to sit down and say who is objectively the best person ever to call wrestling matches, it's beyond a shadow of doubt, it's Jim Ross. So I kind of have this thing in my head where I think of something as the best and then my favorite, and they're not necessarily the same.
In this case, it's, for me, it's the same. In most other cases, it's not.
Yeah, but Jim Ross he was incredible, and I think some of the reason why he's not my number one is because of the fact that I am still, to this day, I think of myself as a WCW guy, which takes you to my number one, who was on your honorable mentions, and that is Mr. Tony Schiavone.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm ready to listen.
I don't know what it is, because I listened to some of his stuff, and I know, depending on who he was playing against, it was sometimes bad. He did not have very good interplay with Eric Bischoff, because Eric Bischoff was just a shill, and I think Michael Cole went to the Eric Bischoff School of Broadcasting, because Michael Cole sounds like he really wants to be Eric Bischoff. And JBL really wants to be Mongo McMichael, and these are not compliments. But Tony Schiavone was always the voice of WCW. He was the voice of the NWA. He was the guy there on Saturday mornings at 6:05 in the morning when I was up watching, Ric Flair do his promos. He was the guy holding the microphone. He was the guy calling the matches he called matches with Gordon Solie. He was doing the interviews. He became the voice of Nitro. He was the voice of the entire WCW run. And that just, to me, I was always a WCW fan. When I really got into wrestling, I was living in Florida. And so, you had the last remnants of the NWA and the championship wrestling from Florida, where I watched that TV show. So again, that's where I heard Gordon Solie, and watching Lex Luger come up through there, and then that became absorbed into the WCW, and then Schiavone's work with Jim Ross. Those two worked brilliantly together. I thought. I really like him, but when I think of Tony Schiavone, I don't think of those last couple years in Nitro, when it did get bad. And this is the biggest night ever in the history of our sport. And I know there were executives telling him, you need to say this, because as bad as it is for Michael Cole having Vince McMahon scream in his ear, Eric Bischoff was probably doing the same thing to Tony Schiavone, saying, hype this up as the biggest thing ever. Hype this up as the biggest thing ever. And then subsequently, on that very last Nitro, because he was really good in that he changed the tone. He was like, okay, this is now a WWE show. I'm going to talk like it is a WWE show. And because you could tell he was being told, okay, this is how we call things in WWE. Because he said sports entertainment. And he still talked up how great the company had been and the legacy of WCW, while still doing it in this very pro-WWE, WWE-friendly way. So yeah, that's just me. I will always have a soft spot for Tony Schiavone. I think it's kind of amazing that he never ended up anywhere else doing commentary. I know he does baseball, I think, now. And he's moved on. He's fine with that. I know he'd made an appearance.
He actually started in the WWF in the late 80s.
He did, and he didn't last there very long.
No, he didn't.
And I know he was at one of the TNA, I think, pay-per-views. And he shot pretty hard on old boy Michael Tenay. But I just really like him. One thing I will say, I'm very surprised Vince McMahon was not in your list.
Oh, Vince McMahon was horrible.
He really was.
I mean, as much as he was there, he was bad. It was like when I was young, I realized how bad he was. Like, it's usually like, oh man, he was great. No, when I was young, he was bad to me. You could tell the difference when he was calling his verse and all. You say Michael Cole went to the Eric Bischoff school? Well, Eric Bischoff went to the Vince McMahon school of it. Because Vince McMahon was bad.
Yeah, that's I remember when he started transitioning from just the commentator role to the authority figure role, and it
Yes.
that was a weird time, because that was still during kayfabe, and no one really knew, at least on TV, it was never really acknowledged that this guy's the boss, that he owns the company. And so but he was not good. He was no Michael Cole. I don't think he was that bad. Wow, I don't know, man.
I truly challenge you to go back and listen.
Yeah, no. Come to think of it, because Michael Cole has redeeming value. And
Vince McMahon was a shell of an announcer, and he was pretty much a punching bag for Jesse Ventura.
Now that part was fun, though.
That was fun, but I'm just saying, he was like, and he would do it with that voice, like, get out of here, and it was just so bad.
You know what's really also something fascinating about Vince McMahon is you listen to his commentary, and then you listen to the way he talks now. I don't know, something happened over the years where he kind of destroyed his voice. Because it's so different than it used to be. And I don't know if it's just all the shouting over the years, but he wrecked his vocal cords, I think. But maybe he's just playing it up, and that's not how he sounds when he's talking to you behind the stage. But so that's our top 5 favorite commentators. Now we need to decide, what are we going to top 5 next week?
Let's see. We're getting towards the end of the year, not quite towards the end of the year. So on this one, because I don't want to be biased on the show, so we're gonna erase the December shows from this. Let's do our top 5 shows of the year.
Okay. Shows 2016. Okay, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah. That is, I'm going to have to really think about that. It's going to be hard for that not to be all takeovers.
Because I honestly think it's going to be like 2 or 3 of my 5. I do have, I don't know if we had enough, because I was going to say top 5 debuts. Yeah, we did have enough this year too. So.
Top 5 WWE debuts?
Or I don't know. Actually, I do have a couple that would be from TNA, but
yeah.
Okay. Let's do top 5 debuts.
Do top 5 debuts. Okay, top 5 debuts of 2016. Man, I'm gonna have to. I know what my number 1's gonna be. I know
what my number 1's gonna be too, and it happened in the first month of the year.
Yes, it did. Man, that's I'm really have to think about that. Damn, dude, you're making me think hard now. Okay.
Yeah, because and let me just say this: on the night of the draft, we're not going to count the night of the draft unless it was especially memorable. We want to talk about like their first match or their first interview or their first appearance on the show.
Okay, so now I think I've got my number 2.
Yeah, there you go. I figured that would help a little when you say that, because you can be like, you can technically say all of them debuted on the Raw and SmackDown draft,
right?
But no, I'm talking about when they actually debuted.
Oh man,
yeah. You do a little research there.
Yeah, well, I think I've got my top 3. Yep. Yeah. Oh man, this is a good one. I like it.